Greetings, people, and welcome to another episode of Short Back and Side. Today, I'm your host, Mr. Blake, and I'm joined by
Millionaire Mike.
Trife.
Pleasure, Pete.
So look, I'm just going to get straight to the point. The question that we're dealing with today is, as an ethnic person or person from the global majority, does having a white sounding name open more doors for you? So, Mike, I'm going to start with you. What has your experience been like having lived in both the continent in France and the UK with an African name as opposed to, say, an Anglicized or an Anglo-Saxon or an English name?
So, for those who don't know, Ghanaian descent. So, because I was born on a Monday, my name in Ghana, depending on what tribe you're from, my Ghana name, which is the tribe that my mom's from, would be Kojo. I'm also Ewe, so my dad would call me Mauli. Them names don't work particularly well in France or in England.
Why?
Because Mauli, they'll just call me Mo.
Yeah.
They wouldn't be bothered to learn how to pronounce it.
Oh, can I just stop you there?
Yeah.
How come they can say Mowgli though from Jungle Book and they say your name? No, real talk.
It's true.
I guess Mowgli.
No, does it not sound similar?
If they call me Mowgli, I'd be offended.
No.
Jungle Book.
No, but I'm saying if they
if
they can say Mowgli, then they can say your
They can say Mauli,
Yeah.
They can. But I think one thing I found is that there is the applying the names of people that come from different parts of the world that are not westernized, they're almost not respected as much. So, and to some degree, I think people would like to familiarize themselves and create familiarities. Meaning that people associate words. So Mauli, it's like Mo, we just call you Mo. Kojo, they might call me Koj, or and because there's no other English equivalent, but my government name is Mike.
But had people done that with your name in the workplace, do you think you could have dealt with it? Do you think you could have navigated like that?
It's a good question. I think it depends on the type of job roles I would have applied for and the type of vocation I would have essentially pursued. So not downing anybody that does any of these jobs. So I respect everybody equally. But let's just say I was a bin man. I could have been Kojo all day long. Don't matter. They'll call me Kojo. Make sure you pick up that bin, mate. But if you are entering corporate Britain, or the corporate workplace where, you're dealing with multi-million pounds clients and pension funds or whatever I think there'll be an expectation that the people that they're dealing with are similar in culture, similar in intellect. And I think sometimes they may prefer to deal with someone that they can deal with a lot more easily without having to make the effort effectively to get to know you in that way, if that makes sense. I'm going to
push back on you with that one. And the reason I say that is I remember with the company Prudential, their top guy, their CEO, was a guy from Ivory Coast.
Yeah,
and and his name was a strong African name.
He was.
Didn't like how they dealt with him because he was kind of like, right, let's get you to get the bank to a certain point and then we're going to dash you away. But he still was able to do that with his full African name and prominence. So I kind of disagree with you in the sense of, the name dictating your role, so to speak.
I'll push back on it because he's probably one of, how many?
Yeah, that's true.
Like,
but
tick box exercise.
I hear you guys, but I think, and I'm going to put my D&I cap on, One of the things we talk about in D&I, diversity inclusion, is people bringing their authentic selves to work. If you're having to code switch your name, not your bit, just like your behavior, how can I tell you to be authentic? And I think this is the problem that we have in a lot of these workplaces. We say we want this, that, and other, but when push comes to shove, you're telling man, no, I don't like that. Make it something else. What I'm trying to say is we need to have more positive disruptors, which I feel the four of us in this room are, and our other people here that are not here with us, Doc, RW. We are positive disruptors. We can make them changes.
I hear your point, but I think it's fair to also consider the past historical connections that we have with the countries that we live in. So Ghanaian descent, ex-British colony, the Gold Coast, colonized by the British, were later colonized by the British. So by virtue of where I come from, African continent, first language, national language, business language, political language is English. So, you know, and the country is miles away from the UK.
Okay.
Yet English is the language that is considered to be the language of the system back there. And you have the other sub-languages, you know, that are spoken on the streets, but everything else is written in English. Okay. The legal system is based on an English legal system. So most of us come here or have been to the UK, especially those of us of Western African descent. We have a deep connection with the UK through colonization. So you'll find that because of that history that we have with the UK, be it positive or negative, when we come over here, our parents are naming us with English names because in their minds, this is considered to be superior to our African ancestral names. And there's also a willingness to try to, you know, assimilate as much as we can. Our skin essentially is always going to be as dark as it needs to be because of where we come from. But everything else, we attempt to assimilate as much as possible with the culture that we consider to be the dominant culture. And in this instance, being in the UK, you know, my name is Mike, but in Ghana, I'm called Kojo, I'm called Mauli. That's just how it is.
But I think the points you made there are very prominent. But I think about, I come from a Jamaican background, and a lot of Jamaican people in this country came off the back of the Windrush. I think they assimilated until they couldn't assimilate no more. Adapted English white sounding names, took on the religion, ate the food, did all them things. And what have they got to show for it? Nothing. So I'm getting to the point, man, like you can assimilate, but if they want to block you, they're going to block you. So I think that's a great segue to you, what do you want me to call you today?
Whatever you like, man.
Pleasure P, yeah?
Pleasure P.
Does a white sounding name as an ethnic person open more doors for you? And I want to hear it from you in the sense of your name and your background in HR. Is it true that sometimes when African names come through on a CV, they get dashed where?
So I have to be honest. I'll do the HR bit first.
Yes,
I'll do that first. So I've been in the HR game for nearly 20 years. I would say when I first started in HR, I was in retail.
Yeah, retail's the worst.
But to be fair, I was given that responsibility to sift through CVs and whatever. And I would say maybe because of my heritage, I didn't the name. I didn't really always see the name. If I'm honest, that's just me myself. But people around me, yes, I observed that behavior. And I seen it like they didn't comment or anything like that. But when you look at the pile, there was a preference. Like, you know, when you look at the
whose preference, by the way?
Well, to the white sounding name.
Okay.
So when you go through the pile of rejects, I'd see Polish names, I'd see like Eastern European names, Asian names, etc. So that was a thing. I'm not going to deny that. That's the early
I've got
days.
another story on that as well.
But like over time, not so much. I'll be honest. I didn't. And when I left retail, I would say we wasn't in that state.
Okay.
Now
There's
I
more
have a
quotas
situation
though now.
Well, yeah, there is.
Yeah.
But I have a situation where I employed a guy who their CV name was Jimmy Stevens. But I'd met the individual, and it was a brown brother with long curly hair and everything. And so I took him on. He was working, and then we got a phone call from the Home Office to say, this guy is not legally here, right? That's by the by. It was the comment that was said to me.
By who?
By my superior.
Okay.
Who actually wasn't white. I have to be clear on that. They weren't a white person. But they said to me, Pascal, did you not look at him and hear the name Jimmy Stevens and put two and two together?
No.
And so the guy sold me a story. His story was, I was born on an army base. It gets worse. And my dad was American. My mom was a servant at this military base. And that's how I was conceived. And that's how I got named. And I bought into it.
Elaborate way.
I bought into it. I don't know what his real name is. Never found it out. But it was the comment of, didn't you look at him and see that his name is not Jimmy Stevens? And my bias, my consciousness kind of said, when I was questioned, I was like, yeah, why didn't I see that? And why didn't I see through the story? But even then I was like, I then bring myself into this. So my name sounds European. It's French, right? But I am half French.
Okay, but then let me push back, if I may.
Yeah.
Would you, both my names are Irish names.
Yeah.
Would you have thought the same if you had given me the job?
So I have to be honest, right? I grew up in North London. And I think there's a difference between maybe where you grew up in London and where I grew up. Because the guys I grew up with who were non-white, it was a blend of names. So like, there was a guy called, I can't say names, can I? But there was Asian sounding names. There was, when you say, and then this is where it might be a stereotype, but we had a guy called Tyrone in our class. We had a guy called Jamal in our class. So these names, which I would have associated with Black heritage, as in like Caribbean, etc., existed. So to me, if I saw you, it wouldn't have meant anything to me because I'd grown around with people that had been given it, and my name is French. The problem with me is people's perception of what a French person should look like. That has changed over time because
you think so?
I do think so, because you said you made a comment in the last one about what the '98 World Cup did to France. So if you look at me, and when I used to play football and stuff, in those times you would have seen a shaved head. It would have looked like Thierry Henry or something. So my name has never really sort of been a thing when people see me. The bit is when they see my name, for some reason, and I said this off camera, they expect a white French girl. That's the bit I can't understand. Because my name is not common. Pascal is not a common name in the UK. Not really. But if you go to France, Mike,
very common.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
But you said a point about, your name, them seeing you and not perceiving you to be French. And I think the two of you were kind of saying it's changed. I don't think it's changed, because I saw the other day there's a black woman in France who's a bad gal singer, and there was uproar because she doesn't represent French values. This gal is Frencher than French, and is trying to put France on the map. But you still have the likes of Marie Le Pen, the far right in France, denouncing her Frenchness, because let's not collide, she's a black French woman. So I still feel there's a bit of work.
There's still society in France that is aggressive in that context, right? And still very strong on their opinion and their views. But let's be honest, if me and you met in Paris, because my dad is also there, we wouldn't think anything. We'd just walk past each other. If you go into Paris right now, you'll find 2,000 of me and 2,000 of him.
True.
And nobody would blink.
It's
and
very
so for me, I've never seen it. The bit I don't understand is why they expect a French white girl here. In France, they wouldn't. If I walked in France, they'd be like, yeah, cool, he's Pascal.
Okay.
It's here, this program that way.
Just on the part that you had a similar...
Sorry,
No. You had a similar
situation. Now, when I used to work at this kind of like insurance company back in the day, there was some South African dude that used to do the recruitment there. And then he was like, he never used to put anyone through with like an African name. He was like, these all goes, blah, 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 and used to dash their CVs away.
But so you say he was South African?
Yeah,
I do.
But South African white.
Yeah, but that's a different.
Why is that different?
Because that's the South Africans have their own thing in terms of South Africa and their history and all that. I wouldn't necessarily say that's a reflection of white people here.
No, but I've known one of my I don't want to bait people up, but one of my associates used to work in recruitment as well, and just white people Caucasian people used to throw people, or not throw them, put them to the reject pile.
Do I know them?
No, you don't.
Oh, okay.
Reject pile that had a different sounding name to English name. Basically, so I know that was not so much anymore, but early like 2000s, when obviously quite a lot of of our generation started to get into the workplace and stuff like that. That's why quite a lot of African guys I know change their name to like John or Felix or something like that. Some like English proper name just so that they can get their foot in the door. So I know that used to happen blatantly. Not anymore, because there's like metrics, everything's done online. Like you can run a report to see how many people, and you can, okay, so why is all the Olatundes going to the reject pile even though they've got the better CV? So it can't happen now. But back then, there wasn't those tools to necessarily pick up them discriminations and stuff.
So do we all feel like there still needs to be a bit of work done when it comes to unconscious bias with the recruitment process?
I think now it's okay because there's so much things in place. There's loads of companies, as you can know, they have tenders where they have to have a certain amount of people ticking that box. But yeah, obviously it could be better, but you can't get away with, say if you were just straight pred, you couldn't do it as blatantly now as you could back then. That's my point.
I think you'd be surprised. Go on, Mike. You'd be very surprised. There are some companies who like to run things a certain way. There are companies who want to be represented in a certain way. And there's always ways around stuff. Yeah. Just like rich people find ways to not pay taxes. Yeah. Companies find ways not to employ people that deemed not to be in line with their values or don't meet the face of the business.
Yeah, there is. But my point is there's more scrutiny on it now than there was back in the day. So you can still do that. So okay, I can let Shagun get the interview, but Shagun ain't get past the first stage. So it just looks okay.
Go on.
I think it's so obviously, again, because I'm quite close to recruitment. I think it's changing.
Why?
One of the biggest things I saw maybe about 5-10 years, actually before that, so maybe 12 years ago, was the need to bring in skilled workers. And we had the skilled worker visa.
Okay.
And that's still a thing. So more and more businesses sponsor skilled worker visas to bring in skill sets that we don't have here. And with that comes names that are not adjusted or amended.
But don't you feel like COVID and Brexit has affected that? Because I don't think you're probably getting the same numbers as you did before.
So when you come to roles like
depends on the role.
Drivers and stuff, because of like Europeans, yes, because Brexit has impacted that, because a lot of the Polish people, etc. There was because I supported logistics for a bit. You couldn't get drivers because the Polish guys were like, no, we're not coming here, or whatever. They didn't renew their stuff. But the skilled roles generally come from outside the EU when they're sponsored and stuff. That's continued throughout.
I would say though, what their companies are doing now is they're not bringing them in the UK as they were before. They're just recruiting. So for example, we have loads of our roles now. They would sponsor someone on a skilled visa, but now they just recruit them from there and they work from there. So they're not actually coming into the UK. So yeah.
I mean, to touch on the point that Pascali's making, I'm very skeptical about the skilled worker visa because to some degree and to some extent, I think when it does, it pushes wages down. Because what you're essentially doing is, I mean, there's 69 million people living in the UK.
Yeah,
it's one of the, it's not the world's largest economy, but it is one of the top economies across the sphere of the world. And you're telling me that there are, out of 69 million people, there aren't enough skilled people to be able to meet some of the quotas and the requirements of those companies. I personally believe, and this is my skepticism, that companies are only driven by profit and increasing the profit margins year in, year out. If they can recruit somebody from abroad for a fraction of the price it would cost for somebody that's in the UK, that's used to a particular living standard, used to a particular working conditions, they will go outside. What we've seen over the last 10 years, and as far as the workplace is concerned, we've seen many organizations decentralize UK-based call centers, UK-based services to go abroad and arbitrage that. That workforce in other countries because it's cheaper and it is more cost effective to train people that have command of English as a first language that don't necessarily have to have a English sounding name to carry the jobs that they actually do, which is what I'm saying. For me, is based on a particular type of job that you perform.
Okay.
If it's going to, if you're going to be working for a hedge fund, if you're going to be working in banking or private banking, private equity, trust me, there are people that have, that legacy money, and that have this old English money, would much prefer dealing with somebody that they consider to be more comfortable with, or they have an affinity with. And I think the way you do that, part of it is class, but at the same time also is having this relationship that can be built straight away, and sometimes having a westernized name goes a long way. It's undeniable. I've experienced it and I know what I'm talking about.
I don't disagree.
I'm
going to say I don't disagree with that. And I think actually though, the kind of roles that you're talking about are not as widespread as the ones that the skilled workers that come in do. Because it's more around medicines and healthcare and things like that, where the piece is here is that not many of the UK citizens here will go through the 7, 8, 9 years of education to get that. Because a skilled worker, you need the qualifications to do it in the first instance. And also the company has to pay you a minimum salary of, I think it's like 37K now, maybe, or something. And actually, when you go across, if you look at what the UK average salary is, which is around about, well, it's probably got up now, but it's about probably 27, 28.
Yeah.
So
I just want to throw a little, not curveball, but again, with my DNI hat on, we know that when teams are diverse, it's not only the diversity of thought you're getting increased productivity, you're getting increased innovation, and you're getting an increase in financial outcomes for the companies.
Yeah.
When me and you were off camera, you were asking me about other things in terms of having a white sounding name as an ethnic person. And I know we've spoken a lot about work, but what about, for example, like loans? Do you think it's a hindrance, or,
I mean, there is. And I want to bring that into the conversation as well. But I'll give you, there's an interesting discussion to be had on this, because you've got segments of the population that follow a particular religion. Let's just say Muslims, for instance. You have a guy called Akbar Mohammed, and you've got tons of Akbar Mohammeds or Mohammed or whatever it is. You'll find that, if you look at, it goes back to school, right? It goes back to the schooling system. I think if my memory serves me correctly, some of the segments of the population, ethnic segments, so you got supposedly black boys underperforming.
Yeah.
And within the sphere of black people, you've got Somali boys who are also considered to be underperforming in school. And if you look at their demographic, predominantly Muslim names, predominantly Muslim background, and you'll find that very few of them, in my experience, and and I'm not generalizing, but I've found very few of them, doing the type of roles that would like them to do, would like them to perform. Most of the workplace, the jobs that I've held, some of them senior managerial positions, I've never had a Somali counterpart work beside me, doing the same thing that I'm doing. It's not saying they're not smarter than me. I'm sure they probably excel, in as far as the intellect is concerned. But I believe that if I went to an interview with my name, I'm talking like me, West African, Akbar Mohammed, East African, Muslim name, me, Western Christian name. We have the same degree, same qualification, present ourselves in the same way. I reckon I would edge him just because my name is Mike, English last name.
Yeah.
Trust me. I do believe that. And I think there will be a bias towards me because of my Christian name, so to speak. And the fact that, do you know what, out of them two, they're both really good, but Mike Bloke sounds nice. Do you know and I can get through.
It's funny you say that, because as I said in it, both my names are Irish.
Yeah.
And remember when we was off camera, I was saying, just because I might have a English sounding or Irish sounding name, doesn't mean I still haven't got to jump through the same hurdles. I've just gone maybe one hurdle extra, because I'm sure all of us have gone for interviews.
Yeah.
And it's, oh, you're Mr. Blake.
Yeah.
And
past that.
Yeah. And then it's right, okay. So there's already perceived connotations about me and how I do things.
Yeah.
I remember when I lived abroad in Belgium, played rugby for a bit for an Irish team. Both my names are Irish. Remember the first day came on the pitch. Oh, I'm not going to bother attempt to do an Irish accent, but they were surprised that Kieran Blake was not from Cork or Limerick or Dublin, but a black British guy from London.
Yeah.
And
on that as well, I went for an interview one time and literally suited and booted. I was looking sharp, like Jodeci sharp. I had all the qualifications on paper, everything. And then the guys come down, old Caucasian guy, to bring me up for my interview. And he looked at everyone else. Terrence, he went up to this guy that was dressed in some jeans and some white guy that was sitting there. He went up to everyone apart from me to ask him. And I was the one that looked like I was going for an interview, but went up to everyone else. And he comes, Terrence, and looked at me and just like looked in shock. And then let's just say I didn't get the job after that.
I could top that. So I went to the interview, sitting there. I was 15 minutes early. I'm looking at time. I'm sitting here for quite a while. My interview should have started about 30 to 45 minutes ago. So I go up to this lady and I said, I don't know what's happened here, but I was meant to have an interview at 2:00 and nobody's come out. So she goes off. And it was actually to the same place. And you know who the recruiting manager is. It was my manager at the time.
Don't make up no one.
Oh,
yeah. So I'm sitting there, and then this woman comes out and she goes, I'm so sorry. I was like, okay. She's like, we did see you there, but we thought a young French girl was coming. I was like, what? And she was like, yeah, so we just thought you was maybe here for something else, or maybe you was a client or something.
You play marbles or something?
Yeah.
But it's that old adage of your face don't fit.
Yeah.
And I've had that. I've had colleagues tell me from other teams, Kieran, lovely guy, my face didn't fit. And I've got an English sounding name. So I don't know. I don't think it's necessarily it's going to progress me. I just think it's maybe a less of a hurdle for me to conquer.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Sorry, just a quick one. Like, I think also between our Afro-Caribbean counterparts who have traditionally westernized name and African counterparts, it's now, as you said, it's now switched, because when now the Nigerians, big up the Nigerians, but when they realize that actually Oluwa Bula 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 is doing fantastic. Do you know what? We may have missed the trick here, because we would favor the Western name,
John Smith,
purely because we've got an affinity to it. We understand it. In actual fact, this Nigerian bloke is actually extremely good. So now I've seen in some workplaces, especially if you go to public sector places, where you see an influx of people from African descent holding decent positions. In councils, in in housing associations and things like that, because they realize that there's actually a skill set that would be passing on, because we assumed that the Afro-Caribbean was the preferred candidate because of the name, not necessarily because of the skill set. So I do agree with you, Pascal, that there's been a bit of a shift, but I'll still maintain that it's based on the industry, and you'll always have a ceiling, I think, for certain individuals anyway, to be able to transcend that. And I think if for whatever reason, let's just say for argument's sake, if you, using the Somali example that I use, if they decided to Christianize their names and adopt, I guess a culture that is more, that I guess the West can actually see themselves in, then it suddenly becomes a totally different ballgame. Because remember, Westerners go to the Caribbean for their holidays, they go to St. Vincent, they go to Jamaica, they go to places like that. So there's an understanding, they enjoy the music, they like the calypso. You don't see many English people traveling to Mogadishu or places like that for their holiday experiences.
Yeah, that's true.
And until that becomes,
cool.
Until it becomes, there's a cultural exchange that both cultures can appreciate or blend in, you're gonna have those difficulties.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know, and I hope I'm not saying this, and I don't mean to offend anyone.
No.
We're just having a candid conversation.
Yes.
You know,
I think it's interesting because I obviously my name is not British. My full name is not British. But I feel like in the room it gives me an advantage. Like I can't, apart from people expecting a white French girl, but the people who know me or the people that meet me like for the first time and don't know my name, or you know they've sent me an invite and then they meet me on Teams or whatever. I feel it gives me an advantage. I don't know why, but I don't ever. I almost feel like it gives me the opportunity to run with the conversation or lead the context of whatever because of what my name is.
really,
I do because obviously I'm not going to say my surname here, but my surname is quite distinct.
People can remember you better.
I feel like
more memorable.
Yeah. Like if you meet me, if you don't remember my face, you remember my name.
Yeah.
Generally speaking.
Yeah.
And
I get that.
There's a thing about, I think, okay, so I'll say this. Saint is in my surname. And I think it has a presence almost for some reason. Just that part, not the rest of it. Just that bit. That people perceive like, oh, X, Y, Z.
I think if I'm honest, I think what we have to consider in the recruitment or any sphere, you know, give an example. Let's use the England team as an example.
Yeah.
Because I think, and it goes back to what Pascal is saying and what I am saying, is that for a very long time, there used to be an association with players, especially ethnic players or ethnic representations of English players. You know, the likes of, you know, the Ian Wrights, the Raheem Sterlings, you know, the blacks that had westernized names. So when they're all standing, singing the hymns or whatever, you know, you would see, you know, different shades, but a consistency of surnames that were English. Now you see the likes of Eze, Saka. None of these guys have got.
But you know why that's changed, though, isn't it?
Well, I would argue that times have changed to some degree. The younger generations, the kids that are going to school with Sakas and going to school with Eze, whose parents might have had some prejudices. Their kids are not that bothered anymore because they're consuming a global culture.
There's a question I wanted to ask as well after, if that's okay.
So they're consuming a global culture, and then they can now don't have the same, you know, Saka might even be second generation Nigerian. So he might be more English than he's Nigerian by descent. So yes, his name might resonate in the streets of Lagos somewhere, but ultimately he's culturally British. So he can still play for England and play as well as he can for a team that, as far as he's concerned, he represents his country of origin, despite the fact that he has a very Nigerian, like Bukayo. No white guy I've met has ever been called Bukayo, but he's called Bukayo.
It will happen.
No, there's a rapper called Tunde that's white, I think, from Manchester.
Yeah, but he has got Nigerian heritage.
But I mean, to me, he looks very white.
Of course,
but no disrespect, big up Tunde, his music is banging. But the point is that you're gonna maybe start seeing, you know, Westerners adopting African names, but it's unlikely, not to the degree, to the proportion that us here overall got white English first names.
Do you know what it is with that England team just in general? You know, obviously our last conversation about the 90s, a certain England manager who's no longer with us, God bless his soul. No, I'm not trying to get no libel on this podcast. He was told you can only have a certain amount of black players in your team. So yeah. So I think going back to what we was talking about France, I think what you saw after France 98 is that all these European teams in England were like, well, you know what? Let's blood these teams more with black players, regardless if they got English sounding name or African sounding names, because essentially they're going to steer us to, and you see it. You look at the English team, the German team, the French team, the Dutch team, even the Spanish team now. You're not seeing just English sounding names on black people and black players. You're seeing powerful African names, and I hope it transcends just football and it goes into other industries.
Yes, but again though, it goes back to what I'm saying. You might see more of that diversity in the sports, but you won't see it in the boardroom. You know, or you won't see it in segment of societies where, the decisions that are affecting millions of people are being made. That is my point. Because what I'd love to see, it's sorry, I don't want to cut you, but very, very quickly, if I could see the same degree, if that parallel existed in 10 Downing Street, that'd be, boom, we patterned, we've done it. But Downing Street is still very much the way that Downing Street looks. And the England team is the way that the England team looks. And it looks a certain way because it's acceptable to have that varying degrees of people from various parts of the English Empire or the British Empire representing England and play for the country. But they're not making no decisions, though. They're entertainers at the end of the day. But I want the man them in Downing Street, the people in the banking sector, insurance sector, legal sector, police, to be as diverse as we are.
So it is changing. So I'm on a program called by a company called OMEC, and it's called Black on Board. And essentially what OMEC does is get Black people into non-executive positions so that we can influence the policy making of decision making for certain companies, because as you said, a lot of these boards don't have men and women that look like us. Pascal, I'm going to come to you because we're a bit
cool.
No, but I want to hear your point.
It was a question. No, it was a question.
Yeah.
So 3 of us have kids.
Yeah.
What kind of names have we given our kids?
It's very good.
That's a great question.
Very good question.
So my eldest has got a French name. The second one's a blend. We negotiated, but we said, well, we actually wanted to give the second one a French name too, but we just landed on a name that we liked.
Can I just? Hardly anyone's got English names anymore.
Well, that's what I want to ask, because I don't know your kids' names.
My eldest two have got French names. My youngest has got a Jewish name.
Okay.
But they've also got their own African names in the birth certificates. Yeah.
My 2 sons have got anglicized English names per se, but the youngest's name, his name is a very rare name.
Yeah.
I've only known a boxer, an idiot. No, afraid to pump me up. There's a boxer that has the same name as my youngest. Yeah. So I don't, and there's a Liverpool football player that's got the same name. Yeah. So I'll tell you off camera.
I'm thinking about that.
But they're dying off though, English names though, aren't they? Yeah. There's not much Terence's, Kieran's, Mike's.
So to be honest, I hear weird names now.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Not necessarily English. Like names you'd associate with
first names or last names.
First names.
Like because in this country, Muhammad is now the number one boy's name in this country.
Like, there's no Georges, hardly any Georges, no Barbaras, no Sandras, no Sarahs, hardly any.
I've yet to see a Mohammed representing England though in football.
It may happen. But I think,
Mo Farah did a great.
But I think with the football, there's never really been that sort of push to have South Asian players.
Yeah,
but you can have a black Mohammed.
Yeah, you can.
Very true.
Yeah,
very true.
There's actually one in Chelsea. So
but I reckon we're more likely to see them in the Saudi League than the Premier League.
True.
At this stage. But I'm conscious of time, so I want to wrap it up like a samosa. So I just want to go around the panel.
Like a samosa.
Yeah, man, wrap it up like a nice samosa. So Pleasure P, does having an English sounding name as an ethnic person open doors for you? Yes or no?
I think it does, but it's changing. It's definitely changed over the years.
Yeah.
For different reasons, which we've covered.
I would say, and again, it's changing. It used to be a lot worse before. Now with obviously analytics and tenders and stuff like that, they can't be as transparent. It could be
true
better,
about the tenders, you know.
But
and CSR.
It's a lot better, and it does put a foot in the door.
That just very quickly, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Your tenders thing, but also CSR.
Yeah.
Is also pushing the agenda with D&I as well.
Yes, that's
so
very true.
CSR is a big focus that has changed a lot of landscape, not just for this kind of thing, but a lot of landscape. Sorry.
I'm controversially, but I would state this. I think it's important for every nation state to have a degree of nationalism. Yeah. And part of the country's ethos and culture is based on names, is based on that are entrenched in the memories and in the culture of the people. So to some extent, I expect England to have a degree of Englishness that will remain. I'm not saying that they shouldn't accept or consider other, opportunities to invite new things into the culture. Yeah. But ultimately, it needs to remain a certain way. Just like in China, Xi Jinping is called Xi Jinping for whatever reason. Donald Trump's called Donald Trump because of significant reasons. So we need to understand that we need to appreciate it, that it's not necessarily oppressive. It's just by the byproduct and the nature of the culture that we live in and that we come from. So, you know, if we were to live in China and our children grew up in China, after 1 or 2 generations, they might become, you know, they will have English names, but their progeny might decide to adopt Chinese names or Cantonese style names because they want to form, you know, relationship with their adoptive countries rather. So I would say yes, being in the UK, being of an ethnic minority, you know, I've been named by my parents, given a Western name, has helped me. I can't deny it. Whether I've known it knowingly or unknowingly, I know that I've been able to benefit from, you know, creating a much easier relationship with people because people can call me by a name that they understand, that they know. I think it's made me more approachable to certain people. And also it's given me opportunities in the workplace by having, you know, a name that is considered to be westernized. I do think that if I had a much more difficult name to pronounce or difficult name to associate with, it would create this alienation because it was like, well, I don't quite know how to deal with this guy. Where is he? Who is he? You know, and it creates more question marks than it gives the opportunity to create bridges. It's just the way humans are at the end of the day, you know?
I think for me to end, I still think even if you, as an ethnic person, if you've got a white sounding name, I still think you got hurdles to climb, to cross and to get over. But I always feel like the cream will always rise to the top, so your talent will always prevail. I think we always have to push authenticity in workplaces, not just even from a diverse perspective in terms of names or ethnicities or protected characteristics, but the school of diversity of thought. And I think more importantly, I think we also have to look upon it that, yes, times are changing and we've got to look at new ways of incorporating people because it can't be a case where we're having this conversation today. And even though some of us in the room have got English sounding names, we're still being told that our face doesn't fit.
Definitely.
Yeah. And with that, people, that's the end of another episode of Short Back and Sides. I hope you liked it. Do us a favor, please. Like, share, subscribe. Where are we on? What platforms are we on, boys?
X,
TikTok,
YouTube, Apple
Instagram,
Podcasts,
Facebook. Yeah, man.
And as we said, you know, tell a friend to tell a friend. Until next time, manners and respect every time. Peace.
Peace. Do you know what, Mike? I was so scared you were going to do a Chinese accent again.
No.
That's why I started
Stop
That's why I was smiling. I was like, no, don't do it.
You should keep that in there.
Yeah.
That's the bits that make the gold.
Do you have to press the button, yeah?
Yeah, just remember we said we'll take some outtakes.
Yeah. That was very, that was very valid.
That's you.